The morning fog rolled off the Pacific Ocean, casting a dreamy haze over the pristine streets of Santa Monica. Inside the Gilt Room, one of California's most exclusive fine dining establishments, crystal chandeliers threw diamonds of light across polished marble floors. The restaurant hummed with the quiet confidence of extreme wealth, where $1,000 bottles of wine were opened without a second thought, and business deals worth millions were sealed over truffle-infused everything. Yet amid this symphony of luxury, a single discordant note caught the eye of James Sullivan, the restaurant's imperious general manager. A man in a weathered leather jacket and faded jeans had just walked through their gilded doors, his motorcycle boots leaving faint marks on the immaculate floor. What happened next, our narrator would later recount, would leave everyone in that restaurant completely speechless and change the course of several lives forever. But before we dive into this remarkable story of humility, kindness, and unexpected revelations, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell, because tomorrow we'll share another incredible story about the power of treating everyone with dignity that you won't want to miss. The Gilt Room wasn't merely a restaurant, it was an institution. Nestled in a historic building overlooking the ocean, it had served Hollywood royalty, tech titans, and actual royalty for over 3 decades. The waitlist for reservations stretched months into the future, and even then, securing a table required connections that most people could only dream of. On this particular Friday morning, the restaurant pulsed with its usual controlled chaos. In the kitchen, Chef Laurent barked orders in rapid-fire French as his team prepared for the lunch rush. The sommelier polished wine glasses that cost more than most people's monthly rent, while the hostess fielded calls from personal assistants trying to secure last-minute reservations for their high-profile clients. The dining room itself was a masterpiece of understated opulence. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, fresh orchids adorned every table, and the air carried the subtle scent of expensive perfumes, mingling with the aroma of freshly baked brioche. Every detail had been carefully curated to create an atmosphere of exclusive luxury. Into this rarefied environment walked a man who seemed to belong to a different world entirely. His dark hair was tousled, not artfully styled. His clothes, while clean, showed the comfortable wear of favorite pieces worn often. Most striking was his demeanor. While other patrons carried themselves with the studied nonchalance of people used to being watched, he moved with genuine ease, as if he were walking into his neighborhood coffee shop. Sarah Chen, a waitress who had started at the Gilt Room just 3 weeks earlier, noticed him immediately. Not because he stood out, though he certainly did, but because of the quiet kindness in his eyes when he caught her gaze and smiled. The man in the leather jacket made his way to a corner table, sliding into the booth with a contented sigh. He pulled out a well-worn paperback from his jacket pocket, not the latest business bestseller or celebrity memoir, but a collection of poetry by Mary Oliver. His fingers, calloused in a way that suggested manual work, turned the pages with careful reverence. James Sullivan observed all this from his position near the host's stand, his jaw tightening with each passing moment. At 42, James had crafted his image as meticulously as the restaurant's menu. His Italian suits were custom-tailored, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, and his watch, a Patek Philippe, had been chosen specifically because he knew its subtle elegance would be recognized by those who mattered. To James, the Gilt Room was more than his workplace. It was his kingdom, and he ruled it with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove. He had climbed from busboy to general manager through a combination of ruthless efficiency and an uncanny ability to anticipate the needs of the wealthy and powerful. In his mind, success meant knowing exactly who belonged and who didn't. Sarah, by contrast, was everything James wasn't. At 26, she was working her way through nursing school, taking the waitressing job to help pay for textbooks and tuition. She approached every table with the same genuine warmth, whether serving a Hollywood star or a tourist who had wandered in by mistake. Her philosophy was simple: everyone deserved kindness. "Sarah," James's voice cut through the dining room's ambient noise like a knife. He beckoned her over with a sharp gesture, his eyes never leaving the man in the corner booth. "Yes, Mr. Sullivan?" Sarah approached, notepad in hand. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice was low but intense. "I was about to take that gentleman's order," she replied, confused by his tone. James's perfectly maintained composure cracked slightly. "Look at him. Really look. Does he look like he belongs here?" Sarah glanced over at the man, who was now fully absorbed in his book, a slight smile playing on his lips as he read. "He looks like a customer who needs service," she said simply. "He looks like someone who got lost on his way to a biker bar," James hissed. "Give him water and the lunch menu. When he sees our prices, he'll leave on his own." Something in Sarah bristled at this. Her parents had taught her to judge people by their actions, not their appearance. "With respect, Mr. Sullivan, I'm going to serve him like any other guest." James's face flushed. "Fine, but don't waste time on him. We have actual VIPs coming in for lunch." As Sarah walked away, she heard him mutter, "This is what happens when we hire people without proper training in luxury service." Sarah approached the corner booth with her warmest smile. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to the Guilt Room. May I start you with something to drink?" The man looked up from his book, and Sarah was struck by the genuine kindness in his eyes. "Good morning. Just coffee, please. Black." "Of course. And would you like to see our breakfast menu?" "That would be wonderful, thank you." As Sarah returned with the coffee and menu, she noticed James watching from across the room, his disapproval radiating like heat from a furnace. She ignored him, focusing on providing the excellent service she'd give anyone. "Our chef's special today is the lobster eggs Benedict with truffle hollandaise," she offered. "It's quite spectacular." The man smiled appreciatively. "That sounds perfect. I'll have that, please." James couldn't contain himself any longer. He strode across the dining room, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I couldn't help but notice you seem a bit out of your element. Perhaps I could recommend some other establishments in the area that might be more suitable." The man carefully placed his bookmark and looked up at James with calm interest. "I'm quite comfortable here, thank you. It's just that our prices can be surprising to those unfamiliar with fine dining," James continued, his condescension barely masked. "We wouldn't want any awkwardness when the bill arrives." "I appreciate your concern," the man replied evenly, "but I think I'll manage." James's smile became brittle. "Of course, sir, though I should mention our average breakfast runs about $200 per person, just so there are no surprises." The man nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for the information. I'll keep that in mind." Sarah watched this exchange with growing discomfort. She'd seen James intimidate customers before, but never so blatantly. As James lingered, clearly expecting the man to reconsider and leave, the customer closed his book and regarded him with gentle curiosity. "You know," he said softly, "I've found that the measure of a place isn't in its prices or its decor, but in how it treats those it considers beneath its standards." James stiffened. "We treat all our guests with respect, sir." "Do you?" The man's gaze was penetrating but not unkind. "Because from what I've observed, you've made several assumptions about me based solely on my appearance." "I'm simply trying to ensure all our guests have an appropriate experience," James defended. "Appropriate for whom?" the man asked. "For them, or for your image of what this restaurant should be?" The question hung in the air. Several nearby diners had begun to take notice of the conversation. The man continued, his voice remaining calm and measured. "True hospitality isn't about exclusion. It's about making everyone feel welcome, regardless of their appearance or perceived status. When we create barriers based on superficial judgments, we don't elevate ourselves, we diminish our humanity." Sarah found herself nodding slightly. She'd felt this truth in her bones, but had never heard it expressed so eloquently. James's face had grown progressively redder. "This is a luxury establishment. We have standards to maintain." "Standards of service, yes. Standards of human worth." The man shook his head slightly. "Those have no place in any business." "Look," James said, dropping all pretense of politeness, "I don't know what kind of philosophical game you're playing, but this isn't a college coffee shop. This is the Guilt Room. We cater to a certain clientele, and frankly, you're not it." The man's expression remained serene, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle straightening that somehow made him seem to fill more space. And what clientele would that be exactly? People who can afford to eat here without checking prices, James snapped. People who understand the difference between a five-star restaurant and a diner. People who... James! A sharp voice cut through his tirade. Chef Laurent had emerged from the kitchen, his white jacket pristine, his face a mask of horror. What are you doing? James turned, confused by the chef's alarm. I'm just explaining to this gentleman. Mon Dieu, Laurent breathed, hurrying forward. Mr. Reeves, I had no idea you were here. Please accept my deepest apologies for this inexcusable behavior. The blood drained from James's face. Mr. Reeves? The man, Keanu Reeves, stood and shook Laurent's hand warmly. Laurent, good to see you. No need for apologies. I was just having an interesting conversation about hospitality with your manager here. Laurent turned to James, his expression thunderous. You don't know who this is? James shook his head mutely, his world tilting on its axis. This is Keanu Reeves, Laurent said, his voice tight with controlled anger. The owner of the Guilt Room, the man who signs your paychecks, the man who built this entire restaurant group from the ground up. The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the restaurant was now fixed on their table. Sarah stood frozen, her mind struggling to process that the humble man she'd been serving was actually the owner of the entire establishment. James's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. I had no idea. Mr. Reeves, I'm so sorry. Keanu held up a hand, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. That's exactly the point, isn't it? You didn't know who I was, so you showed me who you really are. James felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about success, about power, about what mattered in this world was crumbling before his eyes. The man he'd tried to eject from the restaurant wasn't just a customer. He was the very person James had been trying to impress all these years. Mr. Reeves, he began, his voice hoarse, I can't begin to apologize enough. I've been everything this restaurant shouldn't represent. Keanu studied him for a long moment. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before James could respond, Keanu turned to Sarah, who was still standing nearby, her eyes wide. You, on the other hand, treated me with the same respect and kindness I imagine you show everyone who walks through those doors. Sarah blushed deeply. I believe everyone deserves to be treated well, sir. Exactly, Keanu nodded. That's the heart of true hospitality. He turned back to James. This is the kind of person who should be running this restaurant. James felt a surge of panic. Mr. Reeves, please, I know I made a terrible mistake, but I can change. I can... Sarah, Keanu interrupted, how would you feel about a promotion? I think you'd make an excellent assistant manager. Sarah's jaw dropped. What? But I've only been here 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks, you've demonstrated more understanding of what this restaurant should be than James has in 5 years. James's desperation peaked. You're right, she should be promoted. In fact, I'll fire her right now so you can rehire her as a manager. Sarah, you're fired. The absurdity of his statement hung in the air for a moment before Keanu responded, his voice firm but not unkind. James, stop. You're missing the point entirely. He paused, considering. Here's what's going to happen. Sarah is getting promoted to assistant manager, effective immediately. And you... James braced himself for the inevitable termination. You're going to spend the next 3 months working as a server, not a manager, not a supervisor, a server. You'll work the same shifts as everyone else, deal with the same challenges, face the same judgments you've been so quick to pass on others. But, James started to protest, then stopped. What could he say? He nodded slowly. Yes, sir. And James, Keanu added, if you can't learn to see the humanity in every person who walks through those doors, regardless of their appearance or status, then you have no place in this restaurant or any of my establishments. As the lunch rush began in earnest, the atmosphere in the Guilt Room had transformed. Word of what had transpired spread quickly among the staff, and there was a palpable shift in energy, a reminder that kindness and respect were more valuable than any vintage wine or designer suit. Keanu returned to his corner booth, his book open before him, but now he was occasionally joined by staff members who came to introduce themselves or share a quick word. Sarah, still processing her sudden promotion, found herself naturally stepping into a leadership role, guiding newer staff with the same warmth she showed customers. James, now wearing a server's uniform for the first time in years, moved through the dining room with uncharacteristic humility. As he served tables, he began to notice things he'd overlooked before. The nervous couple celebrating their anniversary who'd saved for months to afford the meal, the elderly woman dining alone who brightened at a kind word, the young businessman who was clearly out of his depth but trying to impress a client. Near the end of the lunch service, James approached Keanu's table. "Mr. Reeves," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you." Keanu looked up from his book. "For demoting you?" "For giving me a chance to learn," James replied. "I've been so focused on appearances, on status, that I forgot why I got into this business in the first place." Keanu smiled slightly. "And why was that?" "To make people happy," James said, his voice soft with realization. "To create experiences that bring joy." "Hold on to that," Keanu advised. "Everything else, the prestige, the exclusivity, the status, it's all just noise." As the day wound down, Sarah found herself standing beside James, both of them watching as Keanu chatted with the kitchen staff who'd come out to say goodbye. "He's not what I expected," James admitted. "He's exactly what this place needed," Sarah replied. The narrator's voice returns. "In a world obsessed with appearances and status, it's easy to forget that true class has nothing to do with what you wear or what you own. True class is about how you treat others, especially when you think no one important is watching." What would you have done in James's position? Have you ever judged someone based on their appearance, only to realize you were completely wrong? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of humanity, humility, and hope. Tomorrow, we'll share another amazing story that will remind you of the power of kindness in unexpected places. Remember, the clothes don't make the man, the heart does. And sometimes the person you dismiss as nobody turns out to be the very someone who can change your life forever. In the weeks that followed, the Guilt Room underwent a subtle but profound transformation. Regular customers noticed the difference immediately. The staff seemed more genuine, the atmosphere warmer, more welcoming. James, working his server shifts with increasing confidence, discovered a joy in service he'd long forgotten. He learned the names of regulars, remembered their preferences, and found himself taking pride in making everyone feel special, not just the obviously wealthy. Sarah flourished in her new role, implementing training programs that emphasized empathy and genuine hospitality over rigid formality. She and James developed an unexpected friendship, bonded by their shared experience and commitment to creating a truly welcoming environment. As for Keanu, he continued to visit the restaurant regularly, always in his casual attire, always with a book in hand. But now, instead of being met with judgment, he was greeted with warmth. Not because he was the owner, but because the Guilt Room had finally learned that true luxury isn't about exclusivity. It's about making everyone feel like they belong.